English literacy instruction. So thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm really honored to be here today, and I have to say I'm very impressed by the amazing work that MLRC is doing to support multilingual students and their families and educators. I'm a multilingual learner myself as well. I was born and raised in Seoul, South Korea, where I learned English as a foreign language. And later on, I attended a foreign language high school where I got the chance to learn and study Chinese for 3 years. And after college, I taught reading and English to children with and without disabilities in my hometown. And I think this experience with my research have solidified my focus on language and literacy development and instruction, and always with a critical eye toward equitable education opportunities for multilingual learners. So ultimately, what really drives me is helping educators create classrooms and learning spaces where multilingual students feel seen, heard, and valued, and helping they bridge the gap between their incredible potential and their academic success. So today I wanted to talk about Tier 1 classroom-based content literacy instruction that has strong evidence on positive impact on young multilingual students and language and literacy outcomes. And I'll be focusing on what exactly makes a content-rich literacy intervention beneficial for multilingual learners and even for all students. And this particular intervention is called Model Overrooting Engagement, or MORE. And then the PI behind this is Jimmy Kim at Harvard University. I had the privilege to work with him as a postdoc fellow in his research lab. And since then, I have collaborated with him and his amazing crew members on implementing and evaluating the MORE intervention over the past few years. So this project was supported by Zuckerberg Initiative, and it's the Reach Every Reader project in collaboration with Harvard University and MIT and Florida State University. So before we dive into the specifics of a MORE intervention, so let's talk a little bit about what we know about multilingual students here in the United States, specifically the advantages and unique challenge they face in a second language reading and literacy development. So first of all, we know the multilingualism is a remarkable asset. The students who speak multiple languages have an incredible cognitive strengths like executive function and attention control. They also have a great meta-linguistic awareness and deeper understanding of how language functions. And this can benefit their literacy development across different languages. But they face this unique challenge. Schools is sometimes their primary place where they learn English as a new language, and they are learning a new academic content in a language they are still developing. So it's really quite a demanding dual task cognitively and linguistically. And the research shows that multilingual students usually pick up the code-based reading skills like a phonological awareness and a word decoding. They are sort of a constrained literacy skills. They develop at a similar pace to their native English-speaking the peers. But in terms of the vocabulary and the reading comprehension or unconstrained literacy skills can develop much more slowly. And in background knowledge, that plays a huge role here in terms of how they understand and interpret text they're reading in English. They might have different cultural references and like the variety of their life experiences, which means they might not have had the same exposure to certain vocabulary or a concept as their native English-speaking students. So today, let me zoom in the concept of the vocabulary, the background knowledge. So have you seen or read these books? These are two of my favorite books. I'd like to share some insights from these books, these powerful books that really resonate with me. The first one is Why Knowledge Matters by Dr. Don Hirsch Jr. And the second one is Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler. So both authors emphasize how important knowledge building is for younger children. So Dr. Hirsch tells us that background knowledge is important for comprehension. The more students know, the better they can understand the information, and think about it as the foundation of a house. The stronger it is, the more you can build on it. So he mentions that knowledge is like a mental filing cabinet. So imagine our brains are super organized, I wish. When new information comes in, it's much easier to place it when it belongs to. Now, when kids read multiple books that are coherent and well connected around a certain topic, they are not just reading, they are organizing their thoughts. And this organization forms a schema where each new concept fits in a growing network and building a the framework that helps connect the new ideas with what they already know. And I think it's the most fascinating idea from Dr. Hirsch is his metaphor of a mental Velcro to talk about how knowledge works. So essentially new facts and concepts that stick to what we already know, the creating a web of interconnected understanding. Without that Velcro, I think as a new information comes in, they can scatter and then slip away. The second book is Natalie Waxler's Knowledge Gap. It really pushes me thinking about the knowledge. It's not just something nice to have, but as a fundamental right everyone deserves. So her point is knowledge is not just about the scoring high on tests, it's about the equity and opportunity. So when access to the knowledge is not equal, is uneven, that limits their potential to grow and learn. So she defines the knowledge gap as the differences in background knowledge that are often affected by socioeconomic status. And this gap is not about intelligence, but it's about access and exposure, which significantly affects the students' ability to understand and engage with a complex text. So as educators, we are all committed to education and equity, to making sure that every student, and no matter their background, has opportunity to build the rich foundation of knowledge that opens up their door to new ideas and a possibility. So if we see the knowledge gap as a social justice issue, we need to create a classroom that prioritize knowledge building for all students. So this means sometimes the integrated content-rich curricular that exposes students to the wide range of scientific and historical knowledge and right from the start. So we give all students the tools to navigate the complex text and challenging text and content-rich text and then ideas and then shape their own futures through the knowledge. So let's talk a little bit about what this knowledge gap means for multilingual learners. These students are on a remarkable journey, not just learning academic content, but also new language and culture. So many schools provide important support through ELD, English Language Development Program. But in many cases, this involves pulling these kids out of their regular content area classrooms for specialized language instruction like ESL. This means that there is a possibility that they miss out some key lessons in science and social studies and other content areas. So well-intended practices can sometimes create an unintended barriers to their full participation in knowledge building process in learning community. So they are losing more than just lessons. They are missing out the chance to be a part of a classroom community. So they are sometimes excluded from the shared knowledge and experiences that created common ground for understanding and communication. So this is very essential for fostering a sense of belonging. And this is exactly what Dr. Hirsch emphasized about the communal aspects of knowledge building. So we need to ask ourselves as a teacher and researchers, how can we better provide an inclusive learning environment where language development and content learning go hand in hand? So our goal should be kind of empower multilingual learners and sometimes to partner with them to bridge the knowledge gap and thrive and truly belong to their learning communities. So let's talk a little bit about MORE program. So it's a sustain and spiral the content literacy intervention designed for first through and third graders. So the big idea is to help children build a schema or the knowledge frameworks that they can use to understand new things in science and social study domains. And they can transfer and apply to new related topics when reading and understanding complex text. So building this schema takes time. time. It's not an overnight thing. So that's why the more intervention is designed to sustain over time using a spiral curriculum that gradually introduces complex topic and vocabulary to the kids over time. So here's how it works. So first grade, kids in the MORE program start with very concrete concepts about how animals survive in a habitat. And they leverage the knowledge or developing their schema to study how paleontologists analyze dinosaur fossils and learning more about these animals' physical characteristics and behaviors through the theory and evidence. And then by the time they reach a third grade, they're ready for more advanced concepts like how living system, like a muscular and a skeletal and a nervous system function. So the spiral curriculum helps the students the experience and knowledge building processes, and it helps them transfer their knowledge to the broader context beyond the specific topic they learn about. And this ties back to something Dr. Hirsch Jr. emphasized. Knowledge is a mental Velcro. The more you learn, the stickier it gets. So what's exactly what MORE intervention aim to do? To strategically help kids connect knowledge within and across grade level and building a general schema they can apply and connect other concept in the domain. So what are the core components of MORE intervention? So MORE is a multi-component content-rich literacy instruction, emphasizing the building of a domain knowledge in science and social studies, which then transfer knowledge or schema to adding the applying to reading and writing complex text. So how do we help kids build the knowledge? So we start by organizing MORE lessons into the thematic units in science and social studies. So each unit is driven by a big question that encourages students to aim for mastery and spark their situational interest. For example, the guiding question in the second grade science unit is how do paleontologists use fossil evidence to solve dinosaur mysteries. So each time children read a book, and they are on a mission to answer that question. So instead of bouncing between different texts across different topics, teachers in MORE use conceptually coherent and really related and complex text on a single topic. So this kind of collection, this text set, gives students a repeated exposure to specific science or social study vocabulary and a concept, which really help them deepen their understanding. But those content-rich information texts can be very challenging for some or many multilingual students because those texts have sometimes a technical and abstract vocabulary and a concept, and then also very complex text structures. And also those books often assume a lot of background knowledge that our students might have not yet. So our MORE teachers use interactive read aloud approach with those books. So this means they don't just read aloud to the students, they read with them. So providing the scaffolding and turning reading into interactive dialogue. So this sparks sometimes the students' curiosity and then draws them into the text and content. So teachers also model the thinking aloud process to show students how to unpack and process and connect the ideas. So this is a very interactive way to learn and also build knowledge together and share it and explore the different perspectives as they go. So we found this method really incredibly powerful. It helps young children and also multilingual learners engage and understand and interact with the complex text. And then most importantly, they foster their listening and then language skills. In MORE classroom, teachers use a concept mapping to teach science and social study vocabulary. So students start with a few concept words and hang them on the classroom wall. And then they gradually connect those words with lines and photos to create a growing semantic network over time. So this is a dynamic and a very visual and a highly interactive. So instead of simply memorizing isolated words from the list, the kids actively engage by linking new concepts with those that they already know, and then they discuss how those words are interrelated. And then this approach actually reflects the natural way that our brains learn. When you see unfamiliar words, you try to make a connection between new words and the familiar ones you already know. So every time the kids look at the wall, they're not just singing the word. They see a map of knowledge. It's like a mental Velcro, helping them understand how everything fits together, and then the stick in their mind. And then now students in the MORE program have the chance to apply the transfer what they already learned to a new task, which is argumentative writing. So writing really helps them organize their thoughts and knowledge into what Dr. Hirsch calls the mental filing system. So it's a great way to apply knowledge and schema in a new context. So in more classrooms, after reading and observing new concepts and vocabulary, students get into self-regulated writing activities. So we use a TREE strategy. TREE stands for topic, sentence, reasons, and explain reasons, and ending. So the students start with an open-ended prompt that ties back to the unit's guiding question or big question. And the teachers explicitly model each step of the strategy. So they sometimes provide clear examples. And so students really understand and can apply these ideas in their own argumentative writing. So for our multilingual learners, it's perfectly okay. Their first attempts at writing are modest and really slow. But what is important is our MOLE teachers are there to help them understand and internalize how argumentative writing works and what it looks like and what it entails. So teachers encourage them and challenge them to really dive in and engaging with this writing process. So teachers provide some scaffolding like a sentence starters, and then also kind of provide feedback and also facilitate a group discussion throughout the writing process. But teachers ultimately encourage students to take control of their learning and monitor their progress to become more confident writers. The component in MORE intervention is research collaboration through the small group discussion. So students gather in groups to read supplemental materials like authentic, the magazine articles, and learn more about the topic in the unit. So the group discussion is a sort of the space where students can build and expand and deepen their knowledge on the topic. And to make sure that the discussions are effective as inclusive as possible, teachers provide very clear and specific instructions for equitable discussion routines. So this makes sure that everyone in this group has an equal opportunity to speak and listen so that no one dominates in the conversation. So for example, we use something called elbow partner, where multilingual students can be paired with a native English speakers or more proficient English proficient peers. So one plays the speaker and the other one are listeners, and they switch the roles. So this is one of a strategy help every voice to be heard and value in a collaborative environment. And also it's a really good way for students to develop their oral language skills in a supportive way. So let me give you a glimpse of what MORE lesson sequence typically look like. This is a 10-day science unit on animal survival for first grade as an example. So as you can see, during the first 3 days, MORE lessons start by the setting motivation, goals, and guiding questions. So, everyone understand they are on a mission. And then students build knowledge through interactive reading aloud and concept mapping and across multiple lesson segments. And then they move on to the activities that help students transfer the knowledge, like TREE argumentative writing and research collaboration. So our intervention research was conducted using a randomized control trial that involved the school clusters. So we had 30 elementary schools in one school district, and these were randomly assigned to either a MORE treatment group or a control group. So the control group continued with the business as usual. So that some English learners or multilingual learners continue on ESL instruction or just pulled out instruction or just push in emergent instruction. And in the control group did not implement more lessons, and teacher did not participate in a professional development. And then we had over 5,000 students participate in this study, and 2,848 students participate in a more lesson under the treatment group. And about 1/4 of these students were multilingual learners or English learners based on the school administrative data. So my research team was curious about the impact of more intervention. So what effect does it have on students' outcomes, like vocabulary knowledge in science, social studies, and content focused reading comprehension and argumentative writing? So to find this out, we compared the post-test results of the students in the more treatment group with those in a control group, and we account for the multi-level data structure. Students are nested in written schools. So the results have been quite positive and have been published across multiple studies. And we found the more students consistently outperform their peers in a control group after accounting for students' demographic characteristics and baseline reading abilities. So we observed improvement in vocabulary and in science, content reading comprehension, and also argumentative writing in science and social study with the effect sizes from small to large. So this gave us a strong evidence of the efficacy of the more intervention, but we further asked more question. So for whom does the intervention work and how does it work? I think this is a fundamentally really important question. So we're looking into how well the more intervention works for multilingual learners and what mechanism might be driving improvement in their reading and writing. So this question led us into exploring moderation and mediation data analysis approaches in our research. So let me talk a little bit about the measures we use in our study to capture our students' progress. So for standardized reading proficiency, we utilize the test like a map or a measure of academic progress. This is a statewide the test in North Carolina. And this is a computerized adaptive assessment where the item difficulty adjusts based on students' previous responses, and its scores are scaled using the RASH model. So, and then we also use the DIBELS test to measure the basic literacy skills. For argumentative writing, we set up the two types, one for science and the other one for social study. So teachers first read aloud this a short source passage to provide some contextual background, and then students were asked to write argumentative writing piece based on the given prompt. So we encourage them to form a clear argument and explain their reasoning, and then wrap up with a ending statement. And we also evaluate students' domain-specific vocabulary knowledge in science and also social study, and 12 items for each. And we develop, using researcher developed the semantic association task. So students see a target word and then circle 2 words that are semantically associated with it instead of simply asking a definition of it. And then we assess English order proficiency with a WIDA speaking and listening test. So for whom research question, we look at the differential impact of the more intervention on students' outcomes comparing ELs and English proficiency peers. So we use a multi-level linear modeling to specifically examine the interaction effect between more treatment and English learner status. So we take a look at, this is a vocabulary knowledge outcome. So on the left-hand side, you can see a bar graph for science and vocabulary knowledge outcomes. The first 2 bars in gray represent ELs and non-ELs in the control group. And the third and fourth bars in green color shows ELs and non-ELs in more treatment group. So what really exciting is the more kids, the both EL and non-EL show significantly higher scores in science vocabulary knowledge assessment with a high effect size of a 0.49 and 0.51. And EL in the more program perform as well as non-EL in a control group. On the right-hand side, you see the results for social study vocabulary knowledge. The pattern is quite similar. So ELs in more interventions significantly outperform ELs in the control group, and it show the performance levels similar to non-ELs in control group. So we found this is very impressive. In terms of argumentative writing, when you look at the argumentative writing outcomes, we see a similar trend. So English learners in a more treatment consistently outperform their EL peers in the control group in both science and social study. But interestingly, the effect size for both EL and non-EL are similar. So this means ELs equally benefit from the content literacy intervention in the classroom just as much as non-ELs do. So the most fascinating part is the social study argumentative writing. So the ELs in the MORE program actually score higher than non-ELs in control group who didn't receive more instruction. So I think this is very exciting to see English learners not just keeping the pace, but excelling and demonstrating the powerful impact of our intervention. So, now let's take a look at our findings from the standardized reading assessment, the DIBELS and MAP test. It's really interesting because we didn't see any significant differences between MORE treatment and control group. And this held true for both ELs and non-EL subgroups. So you might already know DIBELS focused on foundational reading skills, and the MAP test focused on more complex and meaning-based reading skills that develop gradually over time. So since our MORE intervention, just like 10 weeks with the 20 lessons, 1 lesson for science, 1 lesson for social study, so this really likely too short to produce significant changes in this kind of standardized reading, the assessment. But this finding suggests that if we want to really move the needle of these reading skills, we might need a longer intervention. So I'm talking about extending the intervention to several years and implement a sustained and spiral curriculum to see a very substantial impact on these broad and domain general reading skills. So building knowledge and developing the schema that takes time, and then that impact on the reading comprehension also take time. So in our latest study published in Development Psychology Journal earlier this year, my team and I tested this exact hypothesis to see how far the MORE intervention, in fact, can travel and want to see its long-term impact on domain general and distal reading outcomes. And then we found, was quite revealing. It takes at least 3 years. So it really does take a long time for kids to build the schema and transfer them to general reading comprehension. And especially for multilingual learners, they not only just build a schema, but also learn to read in a new language. So the process is not quick. It takes a while, but it's pretty transformative. So in terms of the impact of the MORE intervention, English learners, their oral language proficiency measure using a WIDA speaking and listening test, we found something quite impressive. English learners in the MORE program achieve a statistically significant higher scores compared to their counterparts in the control group. So this telling us that the tier 1 MORE intervention is really making the difference in improving their speaking and listening skills, and while building the content knowledge. So our final research question that focused on English learners. So we took the English learner subgroup and then asked how does a MORE intervention work for them, and then what mechanism might be involved in improving their reading and writing skills. So this looks a little bit crazy and really complex. This is our mediation model. So we hypothesized that MORE treatment would improve English learners' domain-specific vocabulary knowledge, and in particular through the concept mapping, where they actively learn new concept words and hang the words on the wall. And then also we expected an improvement in English order proficiency as they engage in an interactive read alouds and in group discussion. And these are key measures that directly contribute to improving reading proficiency. So our mediation model showed that there was no direct impact on standardized map reading scores, but two proximal measures, vocabulary and a reading or oral proficiency, were positively influenced by the more treatment. And then there was no direct path to the map reading score that wasn't significant, but the intervention effectively enhanced the very essential language skill, vocabulary and oral proficiency. Which in turn supported a reading proficiency. So these findings highlight the importance of the building the language skills to improve the reading outcomes for ELs. And let's quickly look at another mediation model, this time the focusing on the social studies argumentative writing outcome. So we found the similar pattern of significance of our previous model, with one exception. The path from English oral proficiency to social study argumentative writing was not significant. You can see the dashed line. So this may be because the composition is more strongly predicted by vocabulary, which is primarily written language rather than on the oral language. So vocabulary knowledge emerged as a much stronger mediator and a predictor of argumentative writing skills than oral proficiency. So as we are wrapping up, I'd like to draw your attention to this research that resonated with our findings. So probably many of you have seen this What Works Clearinghouse practice guide on teaching academic content and literacy to English learners in elementary and middle school. From the Institute of Education Sciences that offer the practical and evidence-based recommendations. And these guidelines help us understand how to better support English learners and address challenges they face in a classroom. So interestingly, the 4 recommendations from the guide really align well with the core components of a more intervention. For example, the recommendation 1 is to teach a set of academic vocabulary words intensively across several days using a variety of the instruction activities. So this reflects our concept mapping to help the students learn new words and the concept and content. And the recommendation 2 suggests integrating oral in a written English language instruction into content area teaching. So this is exactly what our students experience through interactive read alouds and research collaboration and group discussion. And then recommendation 3 is to provide a regular structural opportunities to develop the written language skills. So this is similar to how our students engage in argumentative writing to apply in their knowledge and also create a new text. But our recommendation 4 focuses on providing small group instructional intervention to students struggling with literacy and English language development. So the more intervention is classroom-based tier 1 supplemental intervention, and it's not necessarily provide or include tier 2 or 3 small group instruction components. So it is an important note that what we observe here in the results. So even though there was a significant improvement in domain-specific vocabulary knowledge among English learners, we still the gap. So the improvement really actually hasn't narrowed the gap between EL and non-EL within the treatment condition. So this observation makes us to kind of think about and reflect on potential benefits of additional support for ELs as a recommendation for suggested. So it seems that English learners might benefit from more focused and the targeted and intensive small group instruction, especially in the content-rich information, text comprehension, reading, and writing. So here are final words. We saw how multilingual learners have capability to thrive and build schema within content-heavy literacy instruction. And then Dr. E.D. Hirsch insightfully pointed out that the most direct avenue to reading comprehension competency is a wide knowledge, which also brings with it a subsidiary advantage of a wide verbal competence. So this principle drives our approach by fostering schema through the coherent and conceptually connected text in a content-rich and content-integrated literacy, the classroom. So multilingual learners can enhance their reading and writing, oral language skills, and at the same time, they can engage in the communal aspects of knowledge building. And then Natalie Wexler emphasized the ability to write well about the subject depends on one's knowledge of the subject. So this means that even multilingual learners, even any students, are well equipped with a knowledge about the specific subject and a topic, then the language skills may not be as much as obstacle or barrier as might be assumed. So this highlights the significant role that writing plays in any general education. It's not just a skill, but also opportunity for students, especially multilingual learners, instantiate and then apply and transfer their knowledge more effectively. And then also believe the optimal learning for multilingual learners occurred when the small group intensive instruction is integrated with broader classroom activities. So kind of you should think about the alignment. So the stage alignment support individual learning, their needs, and then also at the same time fostering a supporting learning environment at the same time. And then as an implication for teachers and educators, it's really important to provide ample opportunities for all students, and particularly multilingual students, to engage in really deeply with the content and also language. So this involves like designing learning experiences or a curriculum that are inclusive and then also challenging enough to stimulate their cognitive growth and linguistic growth. And then teachers should thrive to create a curriculum that leverage the strengths of the multilingual learners, incorporating their linguistic assets to really make it everything rich in learning environment for everyone. So thank you so much. And I open up for any questions or feedback and comments.